think we'll do that again. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call out my men, unhook the west bolt and let us go free. But it's up with the bonnets, oh bonny dandy.
While many people know that Canada as a country began in 1867, it's also assumed that its military was born at the same time. However, the seeds for the Canadian military were sown long before Confederation was signed, formed back when the militia fought under the British Crown. Responding to domestic unrest and the threat of American invasion, a group of men were banded together in 1856 to form a cavalry troop. This militia cavalry unit, operating in the heart of rural Canada, eventually became the 1st Hussars, with its home base in London, Ontario, the city so named after the more famous United Kingdom capital. Little did they know that what they started all those years ago would become so critical for the next 158 years and counting, going to war with their allies and extending onto today's battlefield. This is their story.
Well, the 1st Hussars was first constituted as a troop of cavalry in 1856 and served in the Canadian Army as cavalry until as late as 1939, serving through the First World War as a cavalry unit.
As the title and Major Phipps suggests, the 1st Hussars began its existence on horseback, and fortunately, there is film which documents part of this history. These scenes, taken at Port Stanley in the 1920s and 30s, reflect the typical training and militia life in the cavalry. New recruits learned foot drills and how to ride on horseback while romping over fields, down roadways, and along the beach. This cavalry business made good entertainment for a throng of spectators gathered to see the fun on a fine summer's day. It was practically child's play. For all assembled, veiled by this idyllic setting, everything was about to change. But change is hard to foresee. The value of the horse and mounted horsemen in war was well understood. In 1939, on the eve of war, there was confusion in the cavalry. How would a horse compare to the tank? A horse can nimbly jump obstacles, but what can a tank do? Can it jump? Well, it can, sort of. Watch. And again. Once more. Not bad, but definitely limited. While a tank might be a poor jumper, not as good as a horse, here is something a horse can't do. Crush a car. Admittedly, both have their advantages. Right. Let's leave this car for some badly needed repairs and instead reflect back on the charging horsemen who often turn the tide of battle into victory. Wars were won and lost depending on the usefulness of the horse. One such case was the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. King Richard III of England found himself standing alone, without horse or troops. Abandoned on the battlefield, he was heard to cry out, a horse, my kingdom for a horse." Alas, no horse was forthcoming, and he was slain where he stood. History has no record of a monarch pledging his kingdom for a tank, but in World War II, its value on the battlefield was quickly realized. A valuable new weapon. For the 1st Hussars, a good illustration of the tank's striking power was demonstrated in Holland, February 26, 1945. While acting in support of the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada. On that day, a Queen's Own Sergeant, Aubrey Cousins, summoned tank support to winkle out German infantry who were holed up in farm buildings and firing Spandaus with devastating results on the embattled and wounded Canadians. The tank from the 1st Hussars managed to bash a hole in one wall, giving access to Sergeant Cousins, who killed 20 German infantry and captured 20 more. The tank crew commander was Sergeant Charles Anderson, with Trooper Bill Adams doing the honors as driver. Just to make sure the job was complete, they fired 2 rounds of HE through the door. A few hours later, Sergeant Cousins was sadly killed by a sniper. He was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross. The reality of the new war which the Hussars were fighting came upon the world like a thunderclap. The new German blitzkrieg tactics swept from the battlefield forever the classic scenes of charging horsemen. In this lightning war, new images were created. Machines replaced horses. In Canada, this transformation came largely from one man. The father of the Canadian Armoured Corps was General Frederick Worthington, or Worthy as he was known by. To that end, he built an Armoured Corps school at Camp Borden. Coincidentally, the original headquarters for the new Armoured Corps was the Royal School building at Wolseley Barracks in London, home of the 1st Hussars. But not for long. Overnight, the Hussars were no longer a cavalry regiment. In the winter of 1940-41, they moved to Camp Borden and became armored troops. Gone was the special connection to the horse and pleasant gallops, exchanged for a beast called a tank. Full scope of the battlefield atop your trusty steed gave way, replaced by a steel box. Lost was the warmth of a horse. Hello, cold, hard steel. The more, the better. Better safe than warm. You became just one of a crew, 4 or 5, depending on the nature of the beast. In fact, the Hussars' first tank called for a crew of just 2. But no matter, a tank is a tank. Trouble was, Canada had no tanks. To the rescue came the general. Worthy took a personal interest in all details. That's him overseeing the Hussars training on the newly acquired World War I French Renault tanks. These relics were bought from the USA as scrap metal. Not a bad description, given the advancements in tanks made by the Germans. The Hussars' horses were gone, but if you look closely as they rumbled about Borden in their Renaults and Vickers-like tanks, you can see the tactics and playfulness learned from years of cavalry training. Those straight lines proved to be easy targets in this new lightning war. Luckily, they had a few years ahead of them, learning new tactics from others in Great Britain who had the experience of learning on the job, with the added benefit of surviving to tell the tale. The regiment departed Camp Borden in September 1941, and within weeks arrived in England with quarters at Willems Barracks. Renowned for its many mother country comforts of cold, wet, and smoky fires in prehistoric barracks, there were few tanks to train the green Canadian troops fresh from the colonies. Why not give them a little drill, that good old standby square bashing used by all armies to smarten up the troops and fill in time? Colonel Back, whose Hussars' career began on horseback in the 1930s and extended through their Borden training, takes the salute from the well-drilled Hussars. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Eyes right. Good show, men. Bloody smart. It was 15 months since mobilization, but at last they were in a theater of war.
Second World War, the regiment's battle experience was done in Northern Europe. They landed on D-Day with the Allied forces and fought through Northern Europe, winning several battle honors through until VE Day, and they wound up in Germany.
The Germans spent many years creating Fortress Europe. Men like Field Marshal Rommel prepared the beaches with devious obstacles packed with mines to kill any invaders. For the 1st Hussars, the real shooting war began on June 6, 1944, on the beaches of Normandy. Ever experienced knots in your stomach when you were afraid? You can bet on that morning. Coming ashore, there were more knots in Hussars' stomachs than the Navy knows how to tie. But finally, the years of training and preparing were put to practical use. Now they were fighting. Now they were true tankers. The noise and smoke was a constant reminder of a tanker's life, extremely noisy and smelly, with nostrils constantly assailed by the smell of gunpowder, body odor, urine, fuel, and oil. Long hours spent fighting and worrying about the ammunition supply and the enemy's 88s. Keeping in contact with your own forces while staying ever vigilant, peering through apertures no bigger than today's cell phones. Now, no big vistas from horseback. Tankers knew he who sees first shoots first and lives another day. Whether 2 men or 5, they were alone in a foreign environment which, for the next 11 months, they would call home. Of course, the real home everyone longed for was back in Canada, and getting back there was not soon enough for most survivors. When the war ended, it was a time of great rejoicing. Victory in Europe, VE Day. Everywhere in the world, there was dancing in the streets or piling on a car. How about grabbing a girl to give her a big kiss? The world went crazy, absolutely crazy with joy. Hooray! The war was over, and soon the troops would be coming home. Amidst all the merrymaking, there appeared that familiar round figure of Winston Churchill, displaying his famous cigar and V for Victory sign alongside the King and Queen on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. A special attachment to Winston comes to the 1st Hussars through a happy coincidence that in 1895, he was also a Hussar, a member of Britain's 4th Queen's Own Hussars. So it was an ex-Hussar and godfather of the 1st Tank who was the undisputed leader against the Axis powers. Good old Winnie. Peace at last. Well, not quite. The world leaders in Canada were determined to maintain some form of military defense. Question was, what's next?
Following the Second World War, I was reconstituted as a militia unit and has trained in this armories once a week since then. Training at the armories, we cover recruit training. We bring a young man in off the street, you kit him out, and we give him such subjects as drill, small arms, first aid, field craft, and bring him to what we call a recruit standard. Beyond this, we can portion a certain amount of our time to Armored Corps training, and to achieve this end, we will conduct refresher courses for officers, senior and junior NCOs in tactics, wireless, gunnery, and driving and maintenance as far as the tank is concerned.
After the war, with the regiment at home again in the London armories, tanks were retained because no one knew if, especially with the rise of the USSR, another war was imminent. For the Hussars, the ambiguity meant summer camps at Petawawa and Meaford, weekend training at Borden and Ipperwash, with lots of popular driving and range firing. Sometimes tankers think they can go through anything, only to discover they are stuck. Time to call in the ARV for a tow? No, wait. Almost bogged down, but he managed to back it out. Good thing, too. The RSM might get cranky. With the memories of the cavalry days long past, everyone liked to roll about in the smelly beasts. But the Army never changes. In war or peace, horses or tanks, it's always back to the parade square. Get on parade, right dress, eyes right, by the right, quick march. Whether on foot, on horseback, or in a tank, make a straight line. It looks nice if nothing else, and it will be or else if you screw up. Over the years, the RSM's changed, but never varied. You there, that man, I'm watching you. Pick up your dressing. Yes, to the Army, it's all the same. Get in line.
Open order! March! Right! Dress!
Despite the change in mount, from horse to tank, strict attention to upkeep was demanded. To maintain a horse was a clean and enjoyable task. Treat your horse right, and hopefully it will return the favor. Brush him down, give him some water and feed, and Bob's your uncle. You can practically hear them whinny. Notice that both horse and rider are spick and span. A day of training hasn't ruffled man or horse. Now compare this scene with another. Tank training. Notice, if you will, the fine cut of their dirty, greasy, grimy coveralls. Check out the snappy headgear. No straw hats for tankers. They don't fit down the hatches, and they definitely clash with those smart coveralls. The dirty hands and faces match the gear. But ignore a tank's maintenance, and it acts up. It won't even start. That's why cleaning air breathers, greasing the tracks, and giving them a mighty good bash with a hammer is a good idea. Back in the cavalry days, the farrier did similar to the horse's hoofs, except he used a hot branding iron. Brush off loose dirt, otherwise it will only go into the tank and up your nose and down your neck. At the end of the day after tank training, you look and feel somewhat like a tank looks. Terrible! Chimney sweeps are cleaner than this. But after a wash and brush up and a change of clothes, the evening's entertainment begins. When the day is done, one recalls that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. To that end, as in days past on the fields of Port Stanley, out comes the baseball bats. Horseshoes. Attempting to jump, poor by horse standards. Or in comes the White Knight, a.k.a. RQM Moise, with liquid refreshments. Beer. If you were underage, no matter, someone was bound to state, with emphasis, if he's old enough to fight for his country, he's old enough to drink beer. Amen to that, brother. I'll have a lager, please. Fun is fun at any time, but who can deny that maybe the cavalry days were just a little bit special? Ride 'em cowboy. The first Hussars hold their own rodeo. Wrestling on bareback horses. Pull him off if you can. Try again. Grab him. Get him. Come on. Pull him off. Why jump fences when you can jump over a real live human? Oops. Let's see that again. Yep, the horse did clip him. Have another go. That's better. What are you reading, boys? Sorry to interrupt, just passing through, or over. Recreation after training hours in the cavalry was literally horsing around. Baseball, always popular, and what is more appropriate than pitching horseshoes? Hey, where did they get those shoes, boys? Check all the horses to make sure. If sports doesn't appeal, or if you're tired out after all these rousing games, why not just relax and have a smoke? The days of militia cavalry training can only be called fun. Of the many parades on London streets, the 1956 parade, which marked the 100th anniversary of the regiment, was one of the greatest. Led by the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Seabrook, the regiment, comprised of many war veterans, accompanied by tanks both old and new, proudly paraded down Dundas Street before throngs of spectators. If anyone were to ask about the regiment's contribution to the last war, any Hussar could state that 186 died fighting for king and country.
Fire! visit that can destroy our world unless we find the road to peace now.
Recruit standard. He then progresses into national survival training. You've seen some of that, binding a man into a stretcher, first aid again, methods of rescue, searching, and so on. We can cover this pretty well here.
Once the Russians launched Sputnik, the vulnerability of North America to attack took on new proportions. Nuclear ICBMs raining from the sky became a new hysteria. The Canadian government remained aloof from Hollywood's attitude depicted in Dr. Strangelove. John Diefenbaker was no President Merkin Muffley. An alarmed Ottawa was prodded into developing a new role for the Army, one of national survival, soon to be scornfully renamed Snakes and Ladders. It was hated by all concerned, but some, not all, soldiered on. To their credit, no injured survivor in mock exercise ever slid out of a stretcher. Humor wasn't encouraged during this period. But in a world of constant change, you can be sure that in the Army, life in the field doesn't change very much. Sleeping and eating under canvas, ablutions in the fresh, brisk morning air, bracing, isn't it? Shaving with cold water, latrines, it's a great life. Those long lineups for food, served in fancy containers. Eat it fast before the insects get it all, pal. Dining, music, and lounging in the sunshine. Or rain. Well, at least the cooks are happy. Can you spot Larry, Curling, and Mo in this group? And is this W.C. Fields? What do you suppose he's cooking up? A significant year in Canada's history was 1967, our Centennial year, with celebrations extending across the nation. For the 1st Hussars, the country's 100th birthday took on gigantic proportions. Parading with 4 other regiments on Parliament Hill, the Hussars received its first official guidon. From the willing hands of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, WO2 Harry Clough proudly accepts the Armoured Corps standard. The day was filled with all the pomp and circumstance which only the Army and its British traditions are capable of producing. Upon returning to London, the city granted the regiment the freedom of the city. Again, the honor goes to Sergeant Major Clough, who proudly carries the guidon through the streets. He demonstrated such emotion and affection for the new standard, you would almost think he was carrying a baby. Dare we mention how he fidgeted on parade in England years ago? Obviously unseen, except for the camera. Gotcha, Harry. Our D-Day ceremonies in Victoria Park and the family gathering at the barracks reflect some of the good works done by the 1st Hussars Association, working in collaboration with the regiment. Founded in 1946, the association is an august body of past and present serving members, playing a vital role in maintaining the spirit of the regiment in both London and Sarnia, the other home of the regiment since 1964. The 1st Hussars Museum, located at No. 1 Dundas Street, conveniently located beside the forks of the Thames River and the gateway to downtown London, dramatically displays the Hussars' proud history, while promoting it as one of Canada's foremost regiments. The year 2014 marked the 70th anniversary of June 6, 1944, and the Normandy beach landing. As usual, this historical day was celebrated at the famous Holy Roller. Each year, the war veteran list shrinks as time comes a cropper. The old barrack refrain of, "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away," may apply in the public's mind, but not within this regiment. On hand in 2014 were 5 such veterans. They are Jim Fisher, Bill Reed, Eris Dumness, Art Boyle, and Phil Coburn. The participation on any occasion of our gallant veterans, these gallant Hussars, is always a special treat. We will remember them. For most of its 158 years, the 1st Hussars has been a militia regiment. In all those years when a young man or woman decides to join the militia, they have decided to not only serve their country in a meaningful way, but without knowing it, they have made a decision that will benefit them personally in many ways. We know the image of Clark Kent struggling in the phone booth to become Superman. Well, once a week, and sometimes on weekends, each militia volunteer in a similar way doffs a uniform to become someone special. Someone super special. In our case, they become a First Hussar. In uniform or out, it's an experience that will last a lifetime. In recent years, Canada, along with the rest of the free world, has entered a new and often frightening era. In answer to this threat, the Canadian Army has been called out to active duty, and the 1st Hussars have been part of this response. Unfamiliar names of Bosnia, Somalia, and Afghanistan, among others, have become part of the regiment's history as members were deployed to serve alongside our regular forces. With the world showing no sign of peaceful coexistence anytime soon, the 1st Hussars stands ready to serve today, not tomorrow, anywhere in the world. Hodie non cross.
The Lords of Convention 'twas Claverhouse spoke, ere the King's crown go down, there are crowns to be broke. So each cavalier who loves honour and me, let him follow the bonnets all bonny Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call out my men. Unhook the west boat and let us gae free, for it's up with the bonnets all bonny Dundee. Dundee he is mounted and rides up the street, the bells they ring backwards, the drums they beat, but the provost man says just let it be, for the tune is well rid of that devil Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call out my men. Unhook the west port and let us gae free, for it's up where the bonnets all bonny Dundee. There are hills beyond Penton and lands beyond Forth, be there lords in the south, there are chiefs in the north. There are brave Dooney Wassels, 3,000 times 3. Hi, hi, for the bonnets all bonny Dundee. Come fill up my cup, come fill up my can, come saddle my horses and call out my men.